What's good, everyone? It's your boy Nate here for Hybrid Athlete Podcast, episode number 39, I believe. Following up on that one NBA video that I did. If you haven't had a chance, check it out. I think it was a good one. I broke down basically the top 30 NBA players of all time. Broke them down kind of by all this criteria that I set, which was basically, you look at like statistics, winning and accolades, how many championships, MVP, stuff like that, all NBA first team, second team, and stuff. So I'm passionate about basketball. I like watching basketball. I have some, I'm pretty opinionated guy when it comes to the NBA and the league and stuff, and everyone's criticism and everyone's chat about I like this player, this is my favorite player, or this person, LeBron James is the GOAT, and my MJ is the GOAT, or whatever, and oh, you're stupid because you think that this player is better, or people disrespect specific players just because they feel like their era was better, the '90s was better, etc. So I'm surprised actually that there's so much like hostility online, but it's just the nature of the times we're living in, I guess. I mean, everyone just wants to, be cutthroat about like who they think is better. And, there's like a bunch of, YouTube channels where they debate and stuff and have conversations. So I've been following some of those and, I participated a little bit as a matter of fact. So it's been kind of fun just to really dig into those projects. But, that's kind of my side work. I work as a BI developer, a data science role pretty much. So I get into like the kind of the ins and outs of pulling data from e-commerce, digital commerce, companies selling online, brand performance, stuff like that, specific campaigns and stuff that like companies use to kind of like boost their online sales because everything's online now. I feel like there's like a bunch of warehouses, these distribution centers for Amazon where it's like a whole economy where you have kind of like specific companies just kind of like wholesaling through Amazon. They do all the services like managing deliveries, inventory, returns and stuff, processing and all that. So it's pretty crazy, that type of world. So when I'm not doing that, I like to get into some more research. I just learned about kind of how to like manage data, just kind of like data pipelines, like pulled it. That's what I did with this NBA project. I basically pulled all the data from an API into like a data table or a data frame, through like Python code and stuff. And, I just kind of went into like transforming the data, creating my criteria. So like, calculating specific performance metrics for all these great NBA players in history. And I came up with a pretty cool list. I'm probably going to try to post it on my Facebook or social media or something, or at least share it on my LinkedIn profile. And I'm going to post that project. I just posted the project already, but I'm probably going to post like a little short video as well. But I would say, I mean, check out that video. If you like NBA basketball, if you're into sports, even if you don't like basketball that much, it's a pretty cool breakdown of like how I, calculated these points, and I gave weights to each specific statistic and stuff. So I thought it was pretty creative, kind of a learn as you go process and stuff. So, and that's kind of like a good segue into what I wanted to talk about in this episode particularly. Um, I've been kind of going through kind of these phases of, with my workouts and my weeks where it's been more of like, this week's just a grind, like even though you don't really, the last thing you want to do is get up at 4:30 in the morning, go to the gym and work out. And I've been executing on that, like I'm pretty satisfied with how I've been very disciplined and diligent with, it doesn't matter how I feel, I'm going to work out. I'm going to execute this. And through that, I've gained a lot of self-confidence in, okay, I can handle challenges at my job, again, going back, so kind of circling back to my work as a data professional, I had some times this week to where, last couple of months, actually, as a matter of fact, probably the last 6 weeks, where I was just kind of like stuck on a problem. I was really trying to, figure it out. It was struggling, but, like when I kickstart my day off, which is like a good workout, a solid workout, break a sweat, I'm, kind of just into it, 60, 75 minutes, just, intense, effort and intense energy. And then I come back, I shower, whatever, get ready for work. I come into work and I just feel like I'm refreshed, like I'm energized already, like I'm ready to go and just go after the day. So that's kind of been a nice edge that I've been getting just from my work. Is I've really like noticed kind of just an uptick in my kind of my ability to, kind of be reactive in my job, more reactive, as well as like kind of like, kind of be kind of, I guess you could say, just like distribute and like delegate my work on my own, and really like communicate well with my managers and my bosses and stuff, and kind of be a more efficient communicator from that perspective. So that's kind of been, I guess, like my kind of a summary or a recap of like my summer, how my summer went. So I'm looking forward to getting into more different types of projects and work, and potentially get a promotion or change my career a little bit. So, on that path, like I said, I've done this MBA project. I've kind of reflected on fitness and how it's like molded me into the person I am today, and then how I interact with my family, how I interact with my son, how I interact with those who've known me for a while, as well as those who just met me. So the point I'm trying to make on this video is that I would encourage everyone to take a step back almost and just kind of like figure out like what motivates you, and figure out sift through all those cliches of like, losing is the best teacher. The day starts if the early bird, all this stuff, like, no days off, grind, grind, grind. The hardest working person will win or get the advantage and stuff. There's so much material, and there's so many books and stuff that kind of teaches you. But I guess what I'm doing now that I'm in my 30s is I'm starting to like develop a definite style to how I execute and how I stay motivated, and I would say almost obsessed with how I live my life and have my schedule. I do so many things the same way, like all the time. And I think that's almost like the signal of success and the signal of being great overall, is that you want to be able to execute no matter how you feel, obviously, but you also want to be able to like block out all the noise, or like block out all of the inner doubt and all the inner thoughts that can maybe get you distracted. It's, to be honest, it's difficult, especially those who are more advanced in business than I am. I'm looking forward to like challenging myself more in business as I move forward in life. But for the time being, I've come across business challenges, and I've always found a correlation between, are you working out on a regular basis? Is your diet good? Is your energy good? Are you getting sleep and all that? Obviously, logically, that would correlate positively if I'm doing that. But what I've discovered is like the micro improvements, and when you get more advanced in fitness, you almost get a little bit more advanced in how you can execute in the rest of your life, because it's psychologically damning to like work your ass off for a month and make a 2% gain. Whereas when you're a beginner, you work your ass off for a month and you make incredible gains. Maybe I know Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL guy. He's online a lot, but he's been, he always, kind of clarifies it in criteria, and declares it as, you can work out for one day, you notice no results. You can even work out for 10 days and you hardly notice any results. But if you work out for 100 days, you almost look like a totally new person, especially when you started kind of as below average, or, kind of in a hole. So basically, that's kind of how everything can kind of like work when you get into like your work performance or educating yourself. Whereas you're not going to notice anything even if you work hard on like a project or something in business, typically you're not going to notice any significant changes until those 100 days or those 100 hours working on the same thing. And what I've come to realize is that when I did it, when I'm able to zone in on fitness and really like focus on how am I exercising and how am I staying diligent and disciplined, and when I work out, how I work out, how many exercises, how many reps, etc. Focus on making those improvements, focus on recovery, everything. There's so many pieces that's almost like a business project from my perspective. And what I mean by that is like, when you start to maybe like feel a little bit complacent, or you start to like, and I always talk about this on this channel, on this show, I always talk about like, it's a battle with complacency. It's a battle with, oh, I'm just going to like be satisfied with being motivated and executing and showing up. And one of my favorite, guys, Tim Grover, he was the trainer for Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, is he kind of said like, that's a beginner's mindset of being motivated. You have to be obsessed, and obsessed just to win. Winning is great. Winning feels great, but also just obsessed with being great and executing and getting better at what you do all the time. And it may seem like it's going to be like, again, it takes like 100 iterations of the same thing for you to really notice a difference. And I kind of reflected on that in some of my work projects, where I was thinking, sometimes I'm just like, shit, man, like I've worked hard at like the same thing for like, these models, or like these data products or whatever. I worked hard at them for like, 10, 20 days, or like 3 to 4 weeks, almost a month. And I really don't see any results. They're not really being used. They're not like, a focal point. They're not successful, so to speak. Sometimes they break, sometimes they're not working. So like, what's the, like, why am I working hard when I don't see any results? And getting past that mental block of, you have to have the inner confidence of, I know why I started. I know why I'm like doing this. I know why I'm going to not accept failure. I know why I'm going to not accept coming up short in effort, not accept coming up short in my focus on execution, my methodology, and my mechanics, because my mechanics are very important. if I have a lot of confidence in my mechanics and how I approach a situation, a problem, a conversation, a relationship in the business world, I know that I'm communicating and I'm exerting the right energy that I want to exert and focus on. And I feel like the kind of the back pedal of that, really like the supporting framework, is fitness and exercise. Because there's so many people that are famous that talk about how fitness and exercise is everything. You listen to Dwayne the Rock Johnson talk about his gym regimen and his workout, and how dedicated he is. You listen to anyone talk about it, you just fall into like this incredible cycle of, work out, work out, work. And I've fallen in love with that pattern and that cycle over the last, basically the last 5 or 6 years of my life specifically, where I'm like really zoned in on it. I feel confident that I'm giving it great effort and I've seen the results in my personal life, with my family, with my child and stuff. So all this stuff is kind of like, culminating. And what I encourage people to do, especially those people that are maybe like, I designed this podcast to like maybe speak to the folks who are similar to me, who definitely love to exercise, but also they're a little bit more advanced, meaning like they sometimes just need to find a way to get an edge to almost like, figure out like, why do I, sometimes you do, especially if you've been working out for 10, 15, 20 years, you start just to feel like, well, like I'm just going to show up because I've done it so long. Great. I'm not making that much progress, but at least I'm doing it. At least I'm staying healthy, all that stuff. And sometimes when we fall into that rut, like we need to find a way to kind of like pull in some extra initiative and some extra kind of like energy, just to kind of like push past those plateaus and like do it strategically in different ways. Like one way to get past a plateau or being stagnant is just to like, maybe like consume different food, or like, sleep more or something, or just like focus on a different mechanically, like physically change the mechanics of how you work out, what exercises you do. And that's great. You can see results that way. But also like in between the ears, basically, that's where I've discovered like there's so much untapped potential. You listen to like a fighter like Israel Adesanya talk about the mind, like how you can manifest things from the mind, and visualization. Visualization is incredible, and using your mind in a way to where you can harness more energy and more potential. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'm starting to like tap into that type of lifestyle to where I realize, wow, like I can really like apply these thought exercises and apply these visualizations at the right time in my day, or when I'm conversing with my peers or folks at work, or like, anyone who's in my life. And then I'm starting to like realize, okay, you can kind of like you can gain more control of what energy and what kind of like feedback and what type of, you know environment comes back at you, right? So like ideally we all want, everyone to accept us and approve of everything we do and like praise us and appreciate us, and we never like negative feedback. But I think like one thing that I'm learning to do is like draw the right type of negative feedback, because of like how I approach the gym is kind of how I approach, the rest of my life. And what I mean by that is, if I anticipate a neutral or a negative comment coming back, I will approach it as, I'm aware that's, you're going to like tell me something is not correct, or tell me something's a little bit off. And when I communicate that, the feedback is more of like, it's more hyper focused on, okay, he's aware of the fact that he's making a mistake, or that, he's self-aware, which is great. So I don't need to be aggressive in how I approach him. I don't need to be aggressive in how I say I disagree with him. It's more of like a, let's meet common ground as fast as we can. And I think this world is so much about debate, and head to head, just combat politics, everything, even basketball. Like I said, like who's the GOAT? Who's the greatest? Oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. Fuck you. I hate, everything that you're talking about, whatever. So it's so hostile that it's really important to like kind of like draw that line of, okay, we're in a good space. And now that we've established that we have a similar perspective on what's going on, we can just go right into the solution. Cut the bullshit. Let's go to the solution. And that's what I encourage people to do in their fitness, is just like cut the bullshit, go to the solution. Don't beat around the bush of, oh, I was thinking about doing this, or maybe I should change this exercise, or I set my alarm for 5 a.m. I didn't get up, but I slept into 6 instead. I'll get it later. That type of stuff. Like cut through that and just go straight to the solution. And obviously don't lie to yourself, because whenever you lie to yourself about effort or about performance, that's where it's just like it's this horrible, disastrous feedback loop of, it's almost like thieves and stuff, like people that steal. They say like an individual, this is basic psychology, an individual that will steal a quarter is probably the one that's willing to steal a vehicle, or willing to steal something a lot bigger. So those principles that start from the very beginning, when you start lying to yourself about, oh, I don't need to go all the way down on my squat, or, oh, I did enough yesterday. I said I was going to run 15 minutes, 20 minutes today, but I'll cut it to 10. I don't feel the best. So all those little things that creep into your mind and just start to like wear you down and wear down on your conscious, those spill over into your actual life. When I have the confidence of, you know what, man, I really dug in and I grinded it out today in my early morning workout. Now I go into work just like with all the confidence, like, well, if that, I mean, think about how that was a lot more difficult than maybe trying to spend a couple hours to solve a business problem that I don't know how to solve right now. Like that first step, that first brick that you lay from fitness and from the gym is really just like a catalyst for so many more good things in your life. It helps you with with negative, like I said, negative conversations where you just approach them differently if you've given 100% in the gym. And then you have the confidence to like problem solving is such a huge thing in business and in life. It's just, let's solve these problems. Okay, there's an issue with I pay a homeowners association. There's an issue with the property. Let me go after it. Let me not be complacent. Let me cut through the bullshit and let me solve it. Same thing. That you make those little micro decisions at the gym and at the very beginning of your day or whenever you work out or just around fitness overall with diet, with everything, with water intake. And then it just kind of like spills into, okay, I'm not going to tolerate this little thing. And then since I didn't tolerate that little mistake or that little error, I'm now more prepared to tackle the big thing. So first thing to summarize what I'm saying is little mistakes in your business life or in your everyday life don't pile up because of how you work out and how you approach fitness. That's first thing. Second thing is the way you interact with people where the conversations are neutral or negative changes from my experience when I'm heavy into fitness and when I'm really focused and dialed in. So those two benefits, really can like, again, this is my personal experience, but I'm speaking to the masses too, I believe. They can really transform how you view your life and how you view your work and your job. I'm not in like the end all be all. I've started my career, but I haven't ended up to where like I really, really want to be when I'm in my 40s, or 50s, or kind of like, the second half of my working career to where I'm like, okay, I'm in the groove, like I'm making more money, I'm networking with the people that I really want to, stuff like that. I know that that's on the horizon. But for now, like I've really given a lot of effort into like setting up my profile, so to speak, my personality, the way I speak about business and stuff from my experience in fitness. So I've done plenty of episodes about like, how it's great to like set goals and stuff. And like, about a month ago, I talked about like, exercise sequence specifically in the gym that I've used to make gains. I've talked about my weight gain since doing endurance. I've talked about the mental benefits of endurance, kind of like the edge I get just from like doing both weights and endurance and stuff, and how I loved that for a while, but how now I'm more into like focusing on more of a bodybuilding type, sometimes CrossFit type workouts and stuff. So shifted away from that. I've talked about all that stuff, but the reason I wanted to make this one is I haven't really talked about kind of the real connection from fitness to like answering the why, really, really answering the why, because I would say that a lot of people who really have advanced in their fitness and their personal training to like get to the point to where they truly can appreciate and get perspective. That's another word I think that's important here is the one of the biggest benefits of training hard and dedicating yourself to the gym is perspective you get on life. And another perspective you get is like, man, I always treated this problem like it was a huge thing. They have a saying like fear is like a thousand miles wide and an inch deep. And that's so true. Like you spend a lot of time being afraid of these little things that are intimidating you or like dominating your psyche. But in reality, all you have to do is just tackle them, face them head on, face that workout, face that exercise, face that next rep, face that weight that's a little bit heavier than last time, face those things, and then everything else is going to fall into place. And you're going to realize it wasn't that big of an issue to begin with. That's my big takeaway too. And I hope this summary makes sense and this conversation makes sense. But it's really like what's motivating me now is like, I've really learned to like hate and just be disgusted by complacency and by being average. I don't want to be that. I hate it. And it just like it doesn't make me anxious. It just makes me like, oh, like I don't even want to deal with it anymore. Like I don't even want to have the option to resent myself and hate myself for skipping a workout so much that I'm never going to do it. And I can guarantee that. And what I'm going to do is maybe I'll have a day where I go through the motions sometimes. Like I've had some Saturdays lately to where like I just go through the workout like, God damn, at least I'm here, like even walking on the treadmill is painful. It's like, it's exhausting almost, because I've done a lot of good work. I've worked out very hard for like 5 days in a row. This day is just like, get there, get through it and, get it out of the way. And I've learned to have those types of habits and stuff. So I feel like a lot of benefits are starting to come into play for me, and I'm looking forward to like the next chapter in my business career and in my personal life, from a working perspective, from being a parent perspective, because of the foundation I've laid from fitness over the last 5 or 6 years. So that's my message to you all: is I encourage you, when you feel like a little bit down or complacent, or like, well, why do I even work out this hard anymore? Again, this message is for those who are already dedicated, who have already put a lot of effort and had that sweat equity, as they say, in the gym, their dedication to the gym and what they've done, in their life. And you're probably a little bit younger if you're listening to this, I'd imagine, because YouTube fitness channels are really geared towards the younger folks. So that's my message to you all: is it doesn't matter if you're 18 just starting, or if you're like 35, 36, you got a couple kids, you're like, well, I'm just happy, I'm just satisfied that I find time to work out and that I'm in decent shape. That's fine too. But I would just encourage you to elevate, to take that next step. Every time you think you've taken the last step, there's always another step. That's another thing that Tim Grover says: is that the great winners, they just have confidence that it doesn't matter if it's quicksand. It doesn't matter if it's going to trick me at first, or if it doesn't even result in a win. I know there's a next step, and there's a next thing that I needed to do to level up. So keep chasing greatness, keep chasing the next good thing in your life, to to just add value to your mindset, to your family, to everything. And I hope to catch you guys on the next episode. Take care.